Welcome back. The National Prosecuting Authority announced today it's withdrawing charges of racketeering against the former head of the Hawks in Kwa Zulu-Natal, General Johan Booysen. NPA head Advocate Shamila Batohi says a panel investigated the charges that had been instituted against him by the former acting head of the NPA, Advocate Nomgcobo Jiba. Booysen has always maintained he was charged for political reasons. He still faces other charges of murder and housebreaking. They'll still be investigated by the NPA before making a decision. Mandy Wiener is an investigative reporter at News 24. She's been following the story for some time. She joins us now on the line from Johannesburg. Mandy, good evening to you. Thank you for your time tonight. Does this decision come as a surprise that these charges have now been dropped, that this is the final decision from the NPA?
Not entirely, Stephen. We did know that this matter of Johan Booysen was on the desk of Shamila Batohi when she came into the NPA earlier this year, amongst a number of other high-profile contentious cases, like, for example, the prosecution of the so-called road unit, the SARS-3, Johan van Lockenberg, Ivan Pillay, etc. So we knew that this was being looked at. We didn't know that she was going to decide necessarily that the charges would be withdrawn. She did appoint a panel of a number of high-ranking deputy directors to look at this docket, because we know it's got quite a history. The fact that it was first instituted by Nomgcobo Jiba in 2012. It then went to the High Court where the decision was overturned, and then Sean Abrahams reinstated those charges again. So we did know that it was a decision was coming, and I'm not entirely surprised that this is her decision.
General Booysen has always said he was the victim of politics. What was happening around him when he was actually charged? What is the sort of context to all of this?
So we have to remember the context of, as you say, of what was happening at the NPA at the time, and the fact that the NPA, to all intents and purposes, was being captured by a faction that was seen as aligned to the former acting NDP, Nomgcobo Jiba, and was captured by a grouping that was seen to be in support of the state capture project. So Johan Booysen has always claimed that he believed that it was politically motivated, the charges against him, because he was busy with some high-profile corruption investigations into family members of former President Jacob Zuma. So he has always believed that Nomgcobo Jiba has gone after him and prosecuted him, not because of the contents of the docket or the evidence against him, but merely to sideline him as the head of the Hawks in Kwa Zulu-Natal and to get him out of the way of these corruption investigations.
The NPA followed quite a process in this. As you say, Advocate Batohi set up a panel. They came to this decision. What does this mean for the people who made the decision to actually prosecute Booysen? And I suppose, in a way, this is really a question about the people who were running the NPA at the time, Advocate Jiba, and perhaps the then head of the National Prosecuting Authority, or for a time at least, Advocate Sean Abrahams.
So this panel that was appointed by Batohi did actually find that those two decisions were invalid. And for that reason, she should withdraw the charges. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything for them in the short term legally. It just means that their decisions were wrong and that they are now being overturned and those charges will be withdrawn. There have been a number of findings against Nomgcobo Jiba. There was the Mokoro inquiry into her fitness to hold office. And this really does show us that those decisions were questionable. And it also shows the process that's being followed by Batohi here. She's been in the job for 6 months. She's trying to follow protocol here and make sure that her decisions are sound. And for that reason, she's taking her time. But I also think that this decision today is the first indication that she's trying to overturn that state capture project and reinvigorate the NPA and almost rewind the Jiba years.
Are you suggesting then that this is going to be her strategy going forward? She herself has said that the NPA is in a situation worse than she thought when she actually arrived. Are you suggesting that this will be a sort of a slow process rather than anything quick?
Yeah, it's already been a slow process, and this decision comes at a time when there's huge expectation from the public. We have got Hermione Cornelius, who's been appointed as the head of the Special Investigating Directorate in state capture cases. But I'm sure you'll agree that there is a huge appetite from the public for some kind of high-profile prosecution and conviction to come from the NPA, in particular to do with the state capture case. So I imagine Batohi would have looked at this case of Booysen. And, Stephen, it's much easier to withdraw charges in a capture case than it is to instate charges. because investigations need to be done, affidavits need to be taken, evidence has to be gathered. So this, in a way, is low-hanging fruit. It's a win for her. It shows the public that there is action, that she is overturning the captured years, but we still want more from her. She's got to look at that Ivan Pillay, Johan Booysen case and decide what to do there. But also, we want to see a prosecution. We want to see a high-profile politician linked to state capture in the dock, but also a successful prosecution and a conviction at that.
Mandy, I mean, all of the events that happened around Booysen, it seems that they claim to fit into the idea of state capture, that somehow senior politicians were involved in what was happening. Is there evidence to back up that claim or that perception that senior people were involved?
So Booysen would argue, yes, that senior people were involved. There's no direct evidence of that, but, you've got to look at the findings of, for example, Judge Trevor Govan in this matter in the High Court in Kwa Zulu-Natal, where the decision by Jiba that was taken was overturned. And he made a finding that was essentially that her decision was not sound and was questionable. Booysen has already said that he believes it was politically motivated, that Jiba was doing it on behalf of politically connected people, and the inference there was that it was President Jacob Zuma, because the investigation was into a friend of his and into one of his sons, Edward, as well. So that's what Booysen would argue, that he believes that it was on behalf of political principles.
Mandy Wiener, specialist reporter at News 24, thank you very much indeed for your time tonight here on The Full View.